Rise and shine, it's Entspresso time. Hey, it's Carmichael, and I am not a morning person. I'm not. But when you start your day with a powerful morning routine that inspires you, like watching one of these videos, it will change your life. So let's start your day off right together. Grab your coffee, know that I believe in you, and get ready for a shot of Entspresso from Simon Sinek.
I wake up every morning.
Espresso, keep me going.
I wake up every morning.
Do we need pessimists in the world? I mean, sure, we need a little bit of everything in the world. I'm an optimist, so we can tell the pessimist the same thing. Don't you want some optimism in the world? I believe in balance in the world, you know, and where I get uncomfortable, and I think where life gets uncomfortable, is when we face imbalance. When there's too much pessimism in the world, I think it brings us all down. And the way to defeat pessimism is with optimism. But at the same time, as all you have is optimists, then I think we're all going to be living in a cloud, and and we become blind as well. So I think balance is key. I do my job. I'm one of the optimists in the world. I frustrate pessimists. And we need pessimists in the world, and I frustrate them. So, it is what it is. But yeah, we need balance. Long-term needs short-term. Short-term needs long-term. It's all the same thing. So I would rather have a slight imbalance towards optimism. I would rather have a slight imbalance towards long-term over short-term. I would rather have a slight imbalance of people over profit. I don't think there's such thing as perfect balance. There's no such thing as 50-50. At some point we're going to face decisions where something has to give. You can't have two things be equal all the time. And so I do believe in biases. So even though, yes, we need pessimists, we need slightly more optimists. Even though, yes, we need short-term thinkers, we need slightly more long-term thinkers. Even though, yes, we need finite thinking, we need slightly more infinite thinking, and that kind of thing.
Balance is an internal game. We're so worried about trying to be the perfect husband or wife, trying to be the perfect father or mother, trying to be the perfect entrepreneur and work crazy hours like Elon Musk, while we also want to live the fittest lifestyle and have a body like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, and also travel 20 weeks out of the year and live in our dream home and it's just crazy, right? It's impossible. You're setting up standards for a version of balance that doesn't exist. What we need to do is get clarity. What you need is clarity over what balance actually looks like for you. Instead of living somebody else's version of your life, your parents, your friends, society, Instagram's, all the influencers' version of your life, what's your version of your life? What does balance look like for you? You don't want to spend all day being a husband or wife. You don't want to spend all day sleeping. You don't want to spend all day being an entrepreneur. You don't want to spend all day with your kids. You don't want to spend all day doing anything. But in that mix is where we have to carve out our own hats. You could try on other people's hats, and it won't quite fit. Some hats will be a lot more uncomfortable than others. Some will be pretty close. But at the end of the day, you still have to figure out, what's your hat? How does it fit? How does it feel? What does it look like? And that ultimately comes down to your schedule. So if you want to have balance comes from your habits. Your habits are dictated by your schedule. What's in your schedule? One of the best things you can do if you're struggling with balance right now, one of the best things you can do is think about, what does success look like to you? And write it down. This might help. Go to a coffee shop, get outside, go for a walk. Even just being outside, right? Just, having some fresh air can change your perspective, can get you out of a rut, can just open up your mind to thinking more creatively and having more perspective compared to just kind of being locked inside. What does balance and success look like for you? And then how does that map to your actual calendar? So that if you looked at your calendar and you planned it with intention, most of us don't have intention. You're just waking up, falling into your day, responding to other people's emergencies and demands on your time, as opposed to with intention saying, here's how I want to show up today. Here's where I'm going to spend time. Starting with your morning routine. What does that look like? What does that first hour of your day look like? How are you investing into yourself? Are you working out? Are you learning? Are you putting music on? Are you going for a walk? Are you meditating? Are you praying? Are you stretching? Like, what are you doing in the morning? Instead of waking up like an accident and falling into your day, start your day with intention. For again, what success looks like for you. It doesn't matter how many people meditate every morning. If that's not your thing, don't worry about it. Again, we're judging ourselves against other people's morning routines. The most important thing in a morning routine is that you feel bold, powerful, alive, and ready to start your day. For me, the most important thing is music. I take the dogs out. The dog's here. Oh, Nina took them up. Nina took them upstairs. I take the dogs out and I put music on. I get fresh air and music. And music is the fastest way to change my state. For someone else, it's meditation. For someone else, it's prayer. For someone else, it's working out. For someone else, it's something else. Awesome. You try on the hat. You see if it fits. You see if you like it, but you don't judge yourself against somebody else's version of your life. So you start with your morning routine. And then you look at your calendar. What are you doing during the week? How does your week look like? So if I look at mine from a work perspective, like where am I working on my business? Well, I'm doing Monday, I'm spending the day mentoring my team. Tuesday, today, I'm filming on Tuesday. Spend the day filming videos for my YouTube channels. Wednesday is my project day. It's open to do creative work. Thursday is my public facing day. I have movement makers or brandlytics in the morning and then interviews and podcasts all day long. Friday is my CEO day to try to grow the business, bigger picture things. Saturday is fun day with my wife. Sunday is family admin day, shopping, cleaning up the condo, etc. So Monday to Friday is most of where the work happens. Now, how about relationships? Okay, well, Saturday is always fun day. Saturday, we don't do work. Saturday, we're not doing grocery store trips. Saturday, we're not going to Costco. Saturday, we're not doing the laundry. Saturday is designed to be fun time. I spend time every morning with Nina. I spend every day at 2:30 in the afternoon. We take a break and we usually go to a park and hang out with the dogs as long as the warm weather is still here. And then we have dinner together at 5 or 5:30. And then we hang out every night and we'll just watch some kind of show at 9 o'clock. And then Saturday all day and Sunday is family admin day. So that's how I spend time with my wife. And that's a version that worked for me, right? Maybe you want to spend less time with your husband or wife. Maybe you want to spend more time with your husband and wife. I also work with Nina, right? She's right next door to me in our condo, and we're working all day long together as well. But when we take our breaks, it's not about work. It's about going and enjoying, the weather, the dogs, the company, and intentionally getting out of our space. That's what balance looks like for me. And that may change next year, and that may change the year after, and that may change the year after. And it's about being flexible. If you feel off today, that may not make a big difference. But if you feel off today, and it was also off yesterday, and off a week ago, and off last month, and you feel like you're stuck in a rut, and things just aren't going well, and you don't feel happy, you don't have energy, most likely your schedule is out of whack. Your schedule is not creating balance for you. It may work perfectly well for somebody else, but it's not in alignment anymore with who you want to be. As you get married, your schedule changes. As you have kids, your schedule changes. As a virus hits the world, your schedule changes. Summer, the schedule changes. Winter, the schedule changes. It's about constantly making these micro adjustments, because what most people will do is get to the point where they just hate their life so much that it forces a change. Don't be that person. If you feel a little off on a one day, it doesn't matter. But if you feel off again for a couple days in a row, it's not that you suck. It's not that life is terrible. It's not that things are spiraling out of control. It's just that your schedule doesn't fit you anymore. Your calendar needs some retweaking and readjustment. So it all starts with, what does balance look like for you? What does success look like for you? And break it down to the different categories of yourself, success for you, of taking care of yourself, and that's mental in terms of reading, learning, improving, but also physical in terms of working out or exercise or diet, etc. But time for yourself, what does that look like? Success for you, your growth, what does that look like? Success in your relationships, the people around you, whether that's husband, wife, father, mother, daughter, son, close friendships, communities, etc. And then your business. What does success look like for you? And break it down to habits. And recognize that you can't do 24 hours a day on everything. And you don't want to either. And that's okay. And when you start to actually create a plan for success for you, a plan for balance for you, you stop being pulled in so many different directions. You stop feeling jealous that somebody else has this other life. You stop feeling insecure that somebody else's morning routine involves this thing that you're not doing. Because you have security that you've now designed a routine, a schedule, and a calendar that fits for you. So most important thing is just think about, what does balance actually look like for you? Get clarity over that. And then it allows you to actually create a schedule where you can accomplish it and feel successful, find purpose, and have the balance that you're looking for. Now I've got a special bonus clip that I think you're gonna enjoy. But before that, it's time for the question of the day. I wanna know, what was your single biggest takeaway from this video and your plan of action for the next week? When you watch a video and you just get motivated, the science says you have a 35% chance of actually following through. That, Believe Nation, is not enough. But when you create a specific plan of action and write it down of what you're gonna do, that number jumps from 35% to 91% chance of you following through. And when you commit publicly to others, like leaving a comment with your plan down below, that number jumps to 95% chance of you following through. So I wanna know your single biggest takeaway from this video and your plan of action for the next week. Put it down in the comments below, and next week I will profile one of you. Also, if you want to have more self-confidence and self-belief, I've designed a special free program to help you get it. The science says it can take up to 254 days of consecutive action to build a habit. So to help you build a habit of self-belief and self-confidence, I've created a special free training where I will email you a video unlisted to your email every day for the next 254 days to shift your confidence forward. The link to sign up for free is in the description below.
We'll walk into a room and say, here's the problem, here's what I think, but I'm interested in your opinion, let's go around the room. It's too late. I would rather take the risk of walking out, knowing that I might get moved in a way that I've never experienced before, more than just go and have a nice night out and see something that I know is good. Successful measurement, successful recognition is not just for the steps you take. It's not just for the effort. It's that the effort you exerted moved us closer to where we're trying to get to. I'm only successful because of other people. I mean, in the early days, when I just started my business, I was pretty much convinced it was me. And everyone else was helping me out, you know? But I can tell you with hindsight that the reason my business took a nosedive, because my whole trajectory changed. The first 3 years of my business were fun and exciting, and we sort of beat the statistic that, you know, the overwhelming number of us supposed to go out of business, and I didn't. And my fourth year was very difficult. My fourth year was very different, and that's where, you know, when you're running on force of personality, where you're chief cook and bottle washer, you're making every sales call, you're doing the product, you're offering the service, You're doing everything. At some point you reach a level where, especially if you've survived for a few years, that you now have to ask other people for help. So you have to hire people, right? And the stress of letting go or trying to do everything, which is demoralizing for people who you bring on, and then needing structure. You know, what is the actual structure of the business? It's not just you doing everything. And that's where I failed. I was terrible at structure. I continue to be terrible at structure. and really became very, very difficult for me to grow my business. It became very, very stressful. And I really hit a dark patch. And that's when I learned the most valuable lesson, I think, of my career, which is I don't have to know all the answers. And when I don't have to pretend that I do. And a willingness to admit that I needed help, that I didn't know, I knew this, but I didn't know that, allowed me to seek help and accept it when it was offered. And I realize we're all surrounded by people who are plenty willing to help us, but because so many of us spend so much of our time lying, hiding, and faking, people don't offer us their help because they just don't think we need it. Yeah. Because we've presented ourselves in this picture that we're good to go. And so we leave ourselves by ourselves. It's our own fault. And so when I was able to stop lying, hiding, and faking, and was able to say, really good at this, really bad at that, and it wasn't a depressing thing, it was just like an admission,
people came up all over, go, oh my, I could totally help you with that. And that's when my real trajectory took off, was when I realized that it's a team sport, and I have to be really good at the thing that I'm good at, and I have to be willing to help those succeed at what they're good at, and allow others to help me succeed as well at what I'm good at. And so it's that wonderful, wonderful sort of relationship that we all have each other, where we commit ourselves to seeing each other succeed. That is the reason I find myself where I am today.
The thinking of Milton Friedman, the 1970s economist, has really dominated sort of business theory today. He theorized that the responsibility of business, this is his definition, the responsibility of business is to maximize profit within the bounds of the law, right? What about ethics? You know, like a pharmaceutical company that raises the price on essential drug 200%, 300%, 500%, 800%, it's not illegal. It is unethical, right? It makes us uncomfortable, and yet the law is not broken. That's not a good enough standard to run a business. And it was his thinking that gave rise to the theory of shareholder supremacy, which was a theory proposed in the late 1970s, where we prioritize the wants, needs, and desires of a shareholder over the needs of the customer or the employee, which is like a coach who's trying to build a great team by doing what the fans want versus what the players need, right? That's basically shareholder supremacy. And as I said, it was just a theory proposed in the late 1970s that was popularized during the boom years of the 80s and 90s. Mass layoffs, where we use the livelihoods of human beings to meet arbitrary projections on an annualized basis at the end of the year, did not exist as a standard business practice prior to the 1980s. Did not exist. It was popularized during the 80s and 90s. The dismantling of Glass-Steagall, which was an act passed after the Great Depression to prevent another Great Depression from happening, and by the way, was extremely effective. Between the dismantling of the Glass-Steagall in the 80s and 90s and the Great Depression, there were a total of 0 stock market crashes. Since the dismantling, all in the name of corporate profit, we've had 3. We had the dot-com boom, Black Monday in 2008. In other words, when we play simply with a finite mindset, we actually do long-term damage to our own system that's supposed to benefit all of us. And I find that upsetting. We've seen the rise of Friedman's thinking, rather. And like I said, his theories dominate business today. And we feel it. Not only have we had those stock market crashes, but anybody who goes to work today, there's a general feeling of unease, especially if you work for a company that embraces annual or even quarterly layoffs to meet arbitrary projections. Keep in mind, a lot of the companies that employ mass layoffs are profitable, just not as profitable as they would like. It's not like they're losing money and they had to do this to save the sinking ship. That's something completely different. These are highly profitable companies that missed a projection, and so they laid people off so they could meet that projection. There's something fundamentally wrong with that. And we know it because we feel it at work. We see this decline of trust. We are not loyal to our companies anymore. Why would we be? They're not loyal to us. And leaders set the tone. So when companies are loyal to us, we will give loyalty back to them. When they're not loyal to us, why would we be loyal to them? I'm tired of CEOs telling me that millennials these days don't stick around very long. Well, why would they if you don't offer them any kind of loyalty back? And it's not for the people to prove to you that they're loyal, it's the other way around. So when I discovered this thing called the why, I realized its power. It had a remarkable influence over my life, and I loved sharing it. I mean, you know what it feels like, The obsession with sharing the ideas hasn't gone away. I was obsessed with it, and I understood that I was the only mouthpiece for it. And it was at a time when, now people talk about purpose in business like it's no biggie. Back then, it just wasn't a thing.
It was like this big idea that you said.
And then those who talked about it were like weird hippy-dippy types, It wasn't a mainstream thing yet. And so I realized the power of the idea, and I made a conscious decision that I was gonna, everything comes at a cost. There's nothing for free, whether it comes at a cost of money or personal life or time or energy, whatever it is, everything costs something, And so I made the choice that I was gonna put myself out there
and I was going to drive this message as hard as I could, and I made a deal with myself that I would drive hard until I achieved momentum. And I defined momentum as if I were to give less energy, the message would continue to spread the same or faster without me. Right? In other words, building a movement where other people could spread the message as well. And the sacrifice I made was I wasn't at home. And so for a long period of time, I was undateable. You know, I'd meet someone amazing, and I'd be like, oh my God, I had such a great time. Are you free for a second date in 6 weeks? You know, it's like,
6 weeks, yeah.
nobody wants to date me. And plus, when I would come home, from a trip, I'd be exhausted. So I just want to stay home.
Yeah.
So I knew that was happening. And the nice thing is the momentum is, like, it has its own momentum.
Yeah.
And so now I'm sticking to my deal, and I'm sort of slowing down the amount of time that I'm actually on the road. Yeah.
Okay. So now you're
looking for better ways and different ways to spread the message.
Every decision we make in our lives as individuals or as organizations is a piece of communication. It's our way of saying something about who we are and what we believe. This is why authenticity matters. This is why you have to say and do the things you actually believe, because the things you say and do are symbols of who you are. And we look for those symbols so we can find people who believe what we believe. Our very survival depends on it. So if you're putting out false symbols, you will attract people to those symbols, but you won't be able to form trust with them. This is what Tiger Woods did to us. He lied. He lied. He told us what he thought we wanted to hear. And it was great, and we were drawn to it. And all of us who kind of liked that idea of the sort of the good guy, were drawn to it, until we found out it was a lie. He could have been the bad boy of golf. He could have had all the same endorsements and had a fantastic career and still been hailed as one of the great athletes of our day. But he didn't. He chose to lie. Good luck forming trust again, Tiger. We don't believe you. We don't trust you. The goal of putting something out there, if you say what you believe and you do what you believe, you will attract people who believe what you believe. If you go to one of your friends and you say to one of your friends, how would you like me to dress so that you'll like me better? How would you want me to address you? How do you want me to speak so that you'll like me more? Right? Your friends are going to look at you and be like, what are you talking about? You're like, come on. What should I wear so that you'll find me more appealing? And how would you like me to speak to you so that you'll like me more? And your friends are going to tell you, just be yourself. That's why I like you. Just be yourself. Now think about what we do in industry. What do? We do market research, and we go out and we ask the customers, what kind of things, what style should we speak to you? How should we decorate ourselves? What kind of things are you drawn to so that we can do those things so you'll like us more? It's just as ridiculous. It's just as ridiculous. Organizations should say and do the things they actually believe, and they will attract people who believe what they believe. Or they can choose to lie, and at the slightest hint that they might be lying, cynicism sets in. And people start saying, I'm not sure I can trust these guys because there's not a lot of consistency in all the things they say and do, which means they can't have a very strong belief set or they're lying to me. And we call them inauthentic. The entire process of asking other people who we should be is inauthentic. That's hilarious to me. All these positioning studies we do are inherent. We're going to do a study to find out from people so we can be more authentic. That's hilarious. Say and do what you actually believe, and the symbols you put out there, the things you say and the things you do, those red hats are ways that people can find you. What you have the ability to do as designers is create those symbols and allow people to use those things to say something about who they are. Work for companies, work for clients, work for people who you believe what they believe. Show up and feel a part of something bigger than yourself. And your part is to put what they believe into pictures and words and symbols and graphics so that other people can use those things to say something about who they are. People put Harley-Davidson logos on their body to say something about who they are. Corporate logo. Ain't no Procter & Gamble's tattooed on anybody's arm. Because Harley means something. They stand for something. People put that tattoo on there not to tell you that they own a motorcycle. They put that tattoo there to tell you something about themselves. You ever see anybody with a Mac laptop put a sticker over that beautiful shining apple? Ain't never gonna happen. then how will you know who I am? Do you ever see anybody with a PC break out the Windex to clean out their computer? Mac people? Have you ever seen a dirty Mac? Doesn't exist. Does not exist. Why? Because it's who I am. These are symbols we use. The companies that are crystal clear in what they believe, and they're disciplined in how they do it, and they're consistent in what they do, and everything they say and everything they do serves as a symbol of the set of values and beliefs. We use those symbols to say something about who we are. We surround ourselves with the people and the products and the brands that say something about who we are. And when we can find the people who believe what we believe, we're weirdly drawn to them because our very survival depends on it. We need it. And so the more you can give of yourself, the more you can give of what you believe, the more you can with discipline, say and do the things you actually believe, strange things start to happen.
I realized that what I was experiencing was an unfulfilled career or an unfulfilled life compressed and exaggerated into a 24-hour period because I had an amazing day. I had an incredibly exciting experience. I didn't want to wake up and do it again. I was full of regret. I was regretted saying yes to this. I didn't want to be there. I felt totally out of control. And I realized, a lot of people confuse excitement with joy, or they confuse happiness with fulfillment. Our careers and our jobs can be exciting and fun and winning the new client and making a big sale, but that doesn't mean we're fulfilled. That doesn't mean we're inspired. That doesn't mean we have joy in our lives. And I realized this was the mistake I had made. And so I'm in the purpose business. I realized that I felt this way because I didn't have a sense of purpose. And so I tried to invent one. You're here to tell their story and come back. And it worked for like a minute and then it would wear off. And I ran out of solutions. I was paranoid, I was scared, I was depressed, I was out of control, and I had no solution. And so I lay in that bed and I gave up. I gave up. I had nothing else. And having given up, I decided that if I was going to get stuck here, I might as well make myself useful. And so I was going to volunteer to speak anywhere and as often as they wanted me to help out some of the amazing people that I'd met. I don't care if I had to carry heavy boxes or sweep floors. It didn't matter how menial. I wanted to serve those who served others. And upon making that decision, this amazing calm came over me, an excitement even. I was excited to now be there, and I couldn't wait to get to work.
A trusting team is an environment in which people feel safe to raise their hand and say, I made a mistake. I don't feel qualified to do the job you've asked me to do, and I need more training. I need help. I'm struggling at home and it's affecting my work. I'm scared, without any fear of humiliation or retribution or punishment whatsoever. If you do not have trusting teams inside your organization, what you do have is a group of people who show up to work every single day lying, hiding, and faking. You're forcing them to. It's not their fault. You're creating an environment in which people will not share mistakes for fear that it puts them on some sort of short list or just getting in trouble. They will not admit that they don't feel qualified for the jobs that they have for fear of being outcasts or, again, put on some sort of short list or getting in trouble. Which means eventually these things will compound and eventually something will break. We've seen the results. Look what happened with United Airlines. We all saw the film of this poor paying passenger being dragged off the plane with a broken nose, broken teeth, and a concussion, right? And I feel for that crew. I do not blame the crew because they work in a culture in which they fear making the right decision. They actually fear that they will get they believe they will get in trouble before for making the right decision. They actually fear getting in trouble more than doing the right thing. This was not an anomaly. This has been compounding over years. I had a personal experience on that airline years prior that was a red flag. I was attempting to board a plane, and one of the passengers, this played out in front of me, one of the passengers attempted to board the plane before their group number was called, which, as all of you know here, is a felony. And that is exactly how the gate agent treated him. Step aside, sir. I haven't called your group yet. Please step aside and wait till I call your group, is how she talked to a paying customer. So I spoke up. I said, why do you have to talk to us that way? Why can't you talk to us like we're human beings? And she looked me in the eye and said, sir, if I don't follow the rules, I could get in trouble or lose my job. What she revealed to me is that she does not feel safe in her own organization, and her leaders do not trust her to use her own judgment, and they do not trust her to do the job for which she's been trained to do. And guess who suffers? Customer and company. The reason we love flying Southwest Airlines is not because they have some magical formula to hire the best people. It's because the people there feel safe in their own organization. They're entrusted to use their own judgment and do the jobs for which they've been trained to do. If you have an excess of bureaucracy in your organization, and I have worked in the university system, and I feel for the people who abuse me when I go get my ID, because they fear getting in trouble more than using judgment. That is a cultural problem. I do not blame the person. Human beings are social animals, and we respond to the environments we're in, and ultimately, it is the leadership that is responsible for setting the environment. Get the environment right, you get trusting teams. Get the environment wrong, you are forcing people to protect themselves from you. If you work in an organization where it is standard practice for people to feel the need to send a CYA email after every decision they make, cover your ass, that is a sign that they feel that they have to take time and energy out of their day away from doing their jobs in order to protect themselves from you. If you work in an organization where it is standard practice for people to feel the need that they have to keep a folder of all the good things they've ever done, just in case they need it, it is a sign that they feel that they have to take time and energy away from advancing the just cause in order to protect themselves from the organization. That's what you get. If they feel safe, all of their energy goes to advancing the just cause.
Discovering your why is just the beginning. In order to enjoy all the benefits of having a clearly articulated why, you'll need to have the courage and discipline to use it. Like Thomas Edison said, vision without execution is hallucination. There is an ideal order for implementing your why, though sometimes reality does get in the way, and it all starts with you. Our natural tendency is to start with the tangible. We define our value by what we do, so it takes practice to start with why. Like riding a bicycle, at first we're unsure, unsteady. We're in our heads thinking about all the things we need to do, pedal fast, keep enough speed so we don't fall over. We have to really concentrate. We may even fall over, even scrape our knees, but we get back on the bike and try again, and eventually it becomes natural. Starting with why is no different. At first, it feels awkward. It may not even work. But with practice, it will become so natural that you won't even be able to imagine a time when you couldn't do it, just like riding a bicycle. In time, your why will act as a filter for many of the decisions and choices you make. It becomes a tool to help you find a job or seize an opportunity in which you're more likely to succeed. It removes a lot of the guessing. Here's a metaphor to show you what I mean. It's called the celery test. We're constantly asking people for their advice on what to do or how to do it. It's like going to a dinner party and somebody says, "Do you know what you need? You need M&Ms. We've done so well with M&Ms, you've got to use M&Ms." Somebody else says to us, "Rice milk. In this economy, you have to use rice milk." Someone else says to us, "Kit Kats. You have to use Kit Kats." And somebody else says to you, "It's all about celery." We go to the supermarket with all this good advice from all these smart people with brilliant case studies, and we buy everything. We buy Kit Kats and M&Ms, celery and rice milk. There's a lot of time we spend at the supermarket and a lot of money we spend at the supermarket. And when we get to the checkout lane, we're standing there with all these products in our hands, and no one can see what we believe, because we bought everything. But let's imagine we know our why. Let's imagine our why is to always be healthy and only do things that protect the health of our bodies. Now, which products do we buy? Given all the same advice from all the same smart people, this time we only buy celery and we only buy rice milk. They're the only two that make sense. We spend less time and less money at the supermarket. And when we're standing there in line with only celery and only rice milk, now people can see what we believe. Somebody walking past can say, "Hey, I can see that you're healthy, so am I." You just attracted an opportunity or a referral or a friend simply by saying and doing the things that you believe. And the best part is it's scalable. As soon as I said the why, you knew exactly which products we were going to buy. This means the more you can articulate your why, the more others will know what you stand for and will be able to help you make the right decisions. From now on, you will work to ensure everything you do is a good fit. If you do too many things that aren't a good fit, you'll feel uncomfortable and people will feel that you're being inauthentic. On the other hand, when you start with why, your ability to stand out, find support, and work to all your natural strengths will flourish. With practice, you will learn to trust your why. You will eventually start to see your job and the things you do as ways to breathe life into your cause. And the better you get at it, the more you will feel that your life and everything you do has purpose. The best way to implement your why is to work at it slowly. You don't have to do all the tips we suggest. What is important is that you pick up to 3 and commit to practicing and using them now.
Here's a thing that's always boggled my mind, right? Why is it, on balance, not always, but on balance, why is it that small companies tend to be more innovative than big companies? Right? Small companies that are under-resourced, can't necessarily get the best and brightest, they're going to go out of business any day, and yet they come up with brilliant ideas. And big companies full of resources, full of amazing people, buy the little companies that come up with the good ideas. That's usually how big companies innovate. They buy the smaller ones, right? Why is that? Why is it that the most resource companies tend not? And I think it's a question of reality. And what I mean by that is small companies, their vision is more distant than their grasp, right? They have delusions of grandeur. We're going to change the world, change industries, reinvent this, reinvent that. We have no money and no people, but so what? The point is the grasp is shorter than the vision. And I think what happens is as companies get bigger and bigger and bigger, with more and more resources, what they start to do is one of two things. Either their visions become well within their grasp and they don't readjust the vision, or they actually bring the vision back to put within their grasps, right? Make things very achievable. Difficult, but achievable. For vision to truly be vision, it should feel unachievable. When a small business gets together and says, here's our vision, everybody goes like this. How are we going to do that? In big businesses, we say, here's a vision, everybody goes, all right, yeah, no, got it. We'll do a back plan. We got that. And I firmly believe that innovation is born out of the struggle. Innovation is born out of the resourcefulness that you're forced to figure out because literally the vision is way beyond your grasp. Regardless of how many resources you have, it should always feel overwhelming and impossible. The game of business is an infinite game, right? It obeys all the rules. There are known and unknown players. You don't know all the competitors necessarily in one industry to another. The rules are changeable. We haven't all agreed what the rules are. And there is no winning the game of business, right? The game just perpetuates. In fact, the game of business has existed longer than every single company on the planet today, and it will outlast every single company on the planet today. If you look at the Dow Index of 30-something odd companies that make up the Dow Index, something like 70 or 80% of those companies are 35 years or younger, right? So it gets me thinking, if you listen to the language that companies use, they don't know what game they're in. They talk about being number one. Talk about beating their competition based on what agreed upon criteria, based on what agreed upon time frame. Is it market share? Is it profits? Is it revenues? Square footage, number of employees? Over what? 1 month, 5 months, 6 months, a year, 5 years, 10 years, the life of the company? I haven't agreed to those rules. And so companies can arbitrarily declare themselves number one in anything they want if they set the standards and the time frames. And the only reason we do these things on an annualized basis, we tend to compare ourselves to other organizations annually, is only because we pay taxes annually. If we paid taxes every 18 months, that would be sort of the standard. But again, we still haven't agreed what the metrics are to be number one. That means the companies that are playing the infinite game are playing against most of the others who are playing the finite game, means those finite companies find themselves in quagmire. Almost every single bankruptcy, not almost every single bankruptcy is a company that's run out of the will or the resources to play. They drop out of the game. The game will persist. Another company will fill their space. It's not like the business stops or the industry ends. And the companies that are playing the infinite game will frustrate those finite players, which I absolutely adore. So I spoke at an education summit for Microsoft. I also spoke at an education summit for Apple.
Now, I would say about 70 to 80% of the executives at Microsoft spent about 70 to 80% of their PowerPoints talking about how to beat Apple. At the Apple Summit, 100% of the executives spent 100% of their presentations talking about how to help teachers teach and how to help students learn. One was obsessed with their journey, with their vision, with their cause. The other one was obsessed with their competition. Guess who's stuck in quagmire? Guess who's frustrated by their competition?
The next part is a worthy rival. Now, I said before that the only true competitor in an infinite game is yourself. This is true. What your competition does is it helps reveal to you your weaknesses. Admire the others in your organization, not to beat them, there's no such thing. Not to be number one, there's no such thing. But if somebody else is better than you at something, that means you have to go work harder yourself. It's like running in a race. If you're driven to be number one, if you're driven to make the most money, if you're driven to show up in some arbitrary ranking that you don't even have a say in, that's like tripping the next runner. You will win the race, but you're still a slow runner. Rather, fall behind this year, and then you work and work and work, because ultimately the goal is not to be number one this year. The goal is to create an organization that will outlast every single one of you. This is about building strong foundations. This is about looking long-term. And the short-term, money is simply fuel to make the car go. We don't own cars to buy more fuel. We own cars to go somewhere. It's the same thing in an organization. Your organization exists to advance something. The money is simply there to make it go. And I fear that what has happened in the university system is similar to what I'm seeing in business. It's similar to what I'm seeing in politics. It's similar to what I'm seeing in hospitals, which is the sense of excessive pressure to bring money in at the expense of something else. There's an excessive amount of short-termism and massive amounts of rationalizing. This is just the game. We just have to do it. If we don't, somebody else will. The obsession with getting grants, meaning you're hiring people who are more likely to help you get a grant, even though they're teaching things that we don't necessarily even need or want. That's called short-termism.
Define for us an infinite game.
So in the mid-1980s, a theologian named James Carsey wrote this little book called Finite and Infinite Games, in which he defines these two kinds of games. Finite games, which have known players, fixed rules, and agreed upon objectives. Football, right? There's always a beginning, a middle, and an end. And the objective is to win the game. And then there's infinite games. Infinite games are defined as known and unknown players. You don't necessarily know who all the other players are. The rules are changeable. You can play however you want. And the objective is to perpetuate the game, to stay in the game as long as possible. What I find so fascinating about this idea when I first learned about it is we are players in multiple infinite games every day of our lives. There's just no such thing as being the winner in your marriage, you know. There's no such thing as winning global politics. And there's definitely no such thing as winning business. Business is an infinite game. And yet, when we listen to the language of too many leaders, they talk about being number one, being the best, and beating their competition. Based on what? There's no agreed upon objectives, there's no agreed upon timeframes. And so what ends up happening is you have people building organizations and leading with a finite mindset, playing to win, in a game where there's no such thing as winning. And when we play with a finite mindset in an infinite game, there's a few very predictable and consistent outcomes, amongst which include the decline of trust, the decline of cooperation, the decline of innovation, all of which contribute to the eventual demise of the organization itself. And so what I wrote about is what it means to lead with an infinite mindset, because we teach leadership as if it were a finite game. You know, people start business with the goal of winning or being number one, and that's a problem because that's impossible. So what I wrote about in The Infinite Game is leading with an infinite mindset.
I'll ask you a very simple question. Why does your organization exist? We don't need you. Clearly there's plenty of competition. Clearly people have plenty of choices. Even the things that you may specialize in, there are others that do a reasonably good job. They might even be better than you in some areas. So why do you exist? Providing education is table stakes. Everybody here does that. You can't rely on that. That's why the industry exists, not why your organization exists. That's like when I talk to healthcare companies and say, why does your organization exist? And they say, to help people be more healthy. Like, no kidding, thank you. But I know that the culture of one organization is different than the culture of another organization. There are cultural norms that wrap around the sense of purpose, cause, or belief. Great organizations understand their just cause, a cause so just that people would be willing to sacrifice to see the advancement of that cause. Sacrifice comes in many forms. It might mean working longer hours, giving you my best ideas, turning down a better job that offers me more money to stay here because I believe in what you're doing and I want to see that advanced. One of my favorite examples of a just cause is the Declaration of Independence. Our founding fathers declared, literally wrote down, they declared why we needed our own country. All men are created equal, endowed with these unalienable rights, amongst which include life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. They were never against Britain. The whole point is not to be against something, but to stand for something. Britain was simply standing in the way of them advancing their cause. And though they won independence, there are always finite games within the infinite game. Though they won independence, that didn't mean that they had now provided all men are equal. Now the real heavy lifting began. Now let's be crystal clear. When they said all men are equal, what they meant was white Protestant men. Let's be crystal clear. But even early on, during the Revolutionary War, George Washington understood how limiting that was, and he realized that they had to have a broader definition. So he included Catholics. He banned any organizing against Catholics in his armies, and he would regularly attend Mass to send the right message. Sometime later, we abolished slavery and the 14th Amendment. Sometime later, we had women's suffrage. Sometime later, we had Civil Rights Act. Sometime later, we implement gay rights. And you can see that we are striving to provide this thing called all men are equal, all people are equal. And though we will never actually get there, we will die trying. And the obstacles may always be different. And what a just cause is, it is a vision of the future that does not yet exist, and you will commit all of your energies to advance that vision of the world that you have. And the people you want to attract, both those who work there, those who teach there, and both those who come to learn there, believe in your vision of the future. So much so that they may turn down a better offer from someone else because they want to be around people who are committed to building this world that does not yet exist. And every single one of these organizations that you run and represent can have different visions or overlapping visions of the world. But you must be clear what your just cause is, what you stand for. Otherwise, the only thing I have to judge you on is superficial things. It's like dating, right? It's like dating. If somebody tells me what they stand for, who they are, they're talking about their character. And those are the people we want to spend the rest of our lives with. If we do not have any sense of who they are, what they stand for, what their purpose, what their cause, what their beliefs are, what their values are, the only thing we have to judge them on is how much money they make and how good looking they are.
How are you going to do another TED Talk as successful as the first one? And the answer was, I'm not. That was an accident. I won the lottery. Like, I won the lottery and I can't plan to win the lottery again. Like, that's not how it works. And the success of Start With Why, again, like, I can't plan that. Like, you can't plan for something that was an accident. So I had actually completely divorced myself of any notion that I had to produce something that was better or more successful than the first work. And so when I set out to write Leaders Eat Last, the only goal was to share every lesson that I'd been learning on the topic of trust and cooperation, and do the best job I can of communicating those ideas with literally no concern or thought whether it would be more successful than the first one. I didn't mind. I didn't care. And I feel that way about all my work, which is, the why has sort of gone off and done its own thing.
There's a lot of businesses, perhaps some of them are represented here today, where actually doing the short-term thing for financial gain is smart business. It is smart. It is, you do need, because you're working at a public company which reports quarterly, because you need to keep shareholders on side. Maybe you're worried about losing your job if you don't hit a certain target in March or April or May. Isn't there a fundamental conflict between the demands of some businesses, which are short-term interest-based, and your vision of business?
So the argument you're making is the argument you're making is short-term based companies should make short-term based decisions, which means they'll last for the short term.
I'm not actually making an argument of any kind. I just wonder whether or not actually the reality is, maybe this is why you make the point, that
I'm raging against reality. I think that the systems we have in play do not support capitalism. I think we have corrupted capitalism, which is capitalism at its best doesn't follow the rules that we follow today. The concept of shareholder supremacy was a theory proposed by a Harvard professor in the late 1970s, popularized in the 80s and 90s by bosses like Jack Welch, right? The concept of using mass layoffs to balance the books, mass redundancies because we missed our numbers.
This is the Mitt Romney school of business.
Right? Did not exist as a standard way of doing business prior to the 1980s. It was popularized in the 80s and 90s. Let's look at the 80s and 90s. These were boom years of relative peace without the internet, right? Now, that world does not exist. We no longer live in boom times. There is no longer relative peace, and the internet has profoundly changed the way business operates today. In other words, what worked then cannot work now. GE needed a $300 billion bailout in 2008 because that company was not built to last. What I'm saying is the systems that we consider normal ways of doing business, shareholder supremacy, using mass redundancies, and other philosophies in how we incentivize people, how we hire people, et cetera, they are outdated and outmoded, and they are a race to zero. And the companies that continue to embrace those philosophies, big or small, are struggling with engagement, they're struggling with innovation, they go through people like nobody's business, and the executives keep getting fired or quitting, right? Unceremoniously. And by the way, their shareholder value is unstable.
Do you consider yourself a writer?
Yeah.
I mean, were you already writing lots of things? And tell us about your process.
Not a writer. Never imagined being a writer. Never fantasized about being a writer. But as I said, other people who believed what I believed, I got very, very, very good at talking about what I believed and stopped completely talking about what I did. People come to say, "What do you do?" And I wouldn't say what I did, I would tell them what I believed. And literally, I started practicing the things that I eventually wrote about, which is I started with why. And when you do that, it attracts people who believe what you believe. And so the way the book came about is a friend of mine who knew what I believed, and I was sharing my ideas with her, said, "You have to write this down." And I shrugged. And she said, "I'll introduce you to an agent." And I shrugged. And then I had an agent. And somebody else said, "I want to introduce you to an editor friend I had." And I shrugged. I said, "Okay." And the editor talked to me. He said, "I want to introduce you to a publisher." So my meeting with the publisher actually wasn't set up by my agent.
Wow.
And I ended up having a 29-minute meeting with Adrian Zackheim, who's the god of business publishing. He's the original publisher from Good to Great. He came up with the title and everything.
Wow.
And I'm in this 29-minute meeting with him, and 3 days later they offered me a book deal. And I never presented myself as anything that I was not, and I just would tell people what I believed and what I imagined the world could be based on this little idea. And people who believed what I believed wanted to help. And so he helped me by offering me the opportunity to share my idea on a much broader scale. He absolutely took a bet on me.
Let me tell you a story. So a friend of mine and I, we went for a run in Central Park. The Roadrunners organization, on the weekends, they host races. And it's very common at the end of the race, they'll have a sponsor who will give away something, apples or bagels or something. And on this particular day, when we got to the end of the run, there were some free bagels. And they had picnic tables set up, and on one side was a group of volunteers. On the table were boxes of bagels, and on the other side was a long line of runners waiting to get their free bagel. So I said to my friend, let's get a bagel. And he looked at me and said, "The line's too long." And I said, "Free bagel." And he said, "I don't want to wait in line." And I was like, "Free bagel." And he says, "Nah, it's too long." And that's when I realized that there's two ways to see the world. Some people see the thing that they want,
and some people see the thing that prevents them from getting the thing that they want. I could only see the bagels. He could only see the line. And so I walked up to the line. I leaned in between two people, put my hand in the box, and pulled out 2 bagels. And no one got mad at me, because the rule is you can go after whatever you want. You just cannot deny anyone else to go after whatever they want. Now, I had to sacrifice choice. I didn't get to choose which bagel I got. I got whatever I pulled out, but I didn't have to wait in line. So the point is you don't have to wait in line. You don't have to do it the way everybody else has done it. You can do it your way. You can break the rules. You just can't get in the way of somebody else getting what they want. I think the difference between an entrepreneur who cannot achieve scale, which is different from success. You can make a ton of money, but that's not scale. It's just money, right? Versus being able to cross that little chasm and find that tipping point where it can really gain scale, is the ability to let go. I'd been chief cook and bottle washer. I had done every job. And so when I started needing help because I could no longer do every job, I didn't have the time or the energy, I wanted to tell everybody how I used to do it and have them do it that way. That's about like assigning tasks. That's not assigning responsibility. That's not letting go. And it was a slow, uncomfortable process. It's not like tomorrow morning I'm just going to let go. It doesn't work that way.
Right.
It's a very uncomfortable process. I assume you use the analogy of this is your baby. I assume it's something like when your kids grow up and leave the house, or when they become old enough to drive and they gain some independence. Like, we'd like to tell them what to do, what to eat, when to go to bed, when to have a shower, but you kind of lose that. And some parents struggle with that, and it creates tension in the relationship with their kids. And some parents slowly embrace that their kids are adults, and it's the same kind of transition where people come on and you realize that they care and that they're smart and that they're good at what they do and that they want to learn, and so they want to do things they've never done before also. They don't have to be experts in everything. And you let go a little bit and they do an amazing job, and you let go a little bit and then you let go a little bit and they screw it all up, and you say, okay, try again. And the more they feel that you care about their success, the more I started to feel that I cared about. I'm very envious of writers with discipline, who treat it like a job from 9 to 5, or set a goal every day of writing, 1,000 words, 2,000 words, and they do that. That's not my process. My process is best defined as days of guilt and self-loathing, punctuated by hours of sheer brilliance. And the problem is I don't know when those hours will strike. And so I will sit at home and watch TV and hate myself for not getting any work done, and I won't go out for dinner in case one of these things strikes, and then I sit at home and watch TV and say I should have gone out for dinner, and then I would see my friends, and then the next night I go out for dinner, and then I have an idea and I'm writing on tablecloths, and it's more of a creative, mad process than it is a disciplined process.
Performing under pressure, whether it's me or anybody else, is the same. I have the same pressures as anyone else. There's time, there's performance, there's financial. There's deadlines. My pressures are not unique. The situations may be different, but everybody has the same kinds of pressures. But what I find fascinating is the interpretation of the stimuli. Let me explain. So I was watching the Olympics, this last Summer Olympics, and I was amazed at how bad the questions were that the reporters would ask all the athletes. And almost always, they asked the same question, whether they were about to compete or after they competed. Were you nervous, right? And to a T, all the athletes went, no, right? And what I realized is it's not that they're not nervous, it's their interpretation of what's happening in their bodies. What happens when you're nervous, right? Your heart rate starts to go, you sort of get a little tense, you get a little sweaty, right? You have expectation of what's coming, and we interpret that as, I'm nervous. Now, what's the interpretation of excited? Your heart rate starts to go, you're anticipating what's coming, right? You get a little sort of like tense. It's all the same thing. It's the same stimuli, except these athletes, these Olympic quality athletes, have learned to interpret the stimuli that the rest of us would say is nervous as excited. They all say the same thing. No, I'm not nervous. I'm excited. And so I've actually practiced it just to tell myself when I start to get nervous that this is excitement. You know? And so I used to speak in front of a large audience and somebody would say, how do you feel? I used to say, a little nervous. Now when somebody says, how do you feel? I'm like, really excited, actually. And it came from just sort of telling myself, no, this is excitement. And it becomes a little bit automatic later on. But it's kind of a remarkable thing to deal with pressure by interpreting what your body is experiencing as excitement rather than nerves. And it's really kind of effective. It makes you want to rush forwards rather than pull back, and yet it's the same experience.
In the 18th century, there was something that spread across Europe and eventually made its way to America called puerperal fever, also known as the Black Death of childbed. Basically what was happening is women were giving birth and they would die within 48 hours after giving birth. This Black Death of childbirth was the ravage of Europe, and it got worse and worse and worse over the course of over a century. In some hospitals, it was as high as 70% of women who gave birth who would die as a result of giving birth. But this was the Renaissance. This was the time of empirical data and science, and we had thrown away things like tradition and mysticism. These were men of science, these were doctors. And these doctors and men of science wanted to study and try and find the reason for this Black Death of childbed, and so they got to work studying, and they would study the corpses of the women who had died. And in the morning they would conduct autopsies, and then in the afternoon they would go and deliver babies and finish their rounds. And it wasn't until somewhere in the mid-1800s that Dr. Oliver Wendell Holmes, father of Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes, realized that all of these doctors who were conducting autopsies in the morning weren't washing their hands before they delivered babies in the afternoon. And he pointed it out and said, guys, you're the problem. And they ignored him and called him crazy for 30 years. Until finally somebody realized that if they simply washed their hands, it would go away. And that's exactly what happened. When they started sterilizing their instruments and washing their hands, the Black Death of childbed disappeared. My point is, the lesson here is, sometimes you're the problem. We've seen this happen all too recently with our new men of science and empirical studiers and these men of finance who are smarter than the rest of us until the thing collapsed. And they blamed everything else except themselves. And my point is take accountability for your actions. You can take all the credit in the world for the things that you do right, as long as you also take responsibility for the things you do wrong. It must be a balanced equation. You don't get it one way and not the other. You get to take credit when you also take accountability.
I spoke at an education summit for Microsoft. I also spoke at an education summit for Apple. At the education summit for Microsoft, I would say that 70% of the executives spent about 70% of their presentations talking about how to beat Apple. At the Apple Education Summit, 100% of the executives spent 100% of their presentations talking about how to help teachers teach and how to help students learn. One is playing this way, and one is playing that way. One is playing finite, and the other one is playing infinite. Guess which one gets frustrated? So at the end of my talk at Microsoft, they gave me a gift. They gave me the new Zune when it was a thing. And let me tell you, this thing was spectacular. It was the most elegant piece of technology I'd ever used. The user interface was incredible. The design was spectacular. I absolutely loved it. It was easy to use, and it was bright and gorgeous and fantastic. It didn't work on iTunes, which is a different problem, so I couldn't use it, but it was amazing. And elegant. My God, it was elegant. So I'm sitting in the back of a taxi with a very senior Apple executive, sort of employee number 12 kind of guy. And, you know, I like to stir pots. So I turned to him, I said, you know, Microsoft gave me their new Zune.
And it is so much better than your iPod Touch. And he turned to me and he said, I have no doubt. Conversation over. Because the infinite player understands sometimes you're ahead and sometimes you're behind. Sometimes your product is better and sometimes it's worse. The goal isn't to be the best every day. The goal isn't to outdo your competition every day. That's a finite construction. If I had said to Microsoft, I've got the new iPod Touch and it's so much better than your Zoom, they would have said, can we see it? What does it do? React, 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 react. Finite players play to beat the people around them. Infinite players play to be better than themselves. To wake up every single day and say, how can we make our company a better version of itself today than it was yesterday? How can we create a product this week that's better than the product we created last week? We also have to play the infinite game. It's not about being ranked number one. It's not about having more followers on Twitter than your friends. It's not about outdoing anyone. It's about how to outdo yourself. It's not about selling more books or getting more TED views than somebody else. It's about how to make sure that the work that you're producing is better than the work you produced before. You are your competition. And that is what ensures you stay in the game the longest. And that is what ensures you find joy. Because the joy comes not from comparison, but from advancement.
If you want another amazing Simon Sinek video, check it out right there next to me. I think you'll love it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there.
And upon making that decision, this amazing calm came over me. An excitement even. I was excited to now be there.